Hello, and thank you for tuning in into another episode of IIM Rohtak's alumni podcast Kathor Vani. Today, we have with us our guest, Mr. Abhinabha Ghosh. Mr. Ghosh graduated from the third batch of IIM Rohtak. He has previously worked as an AI product partner at Unifor, the Kraft Heinz Company, Entity Data Services, and has recently moved to a new role of Senior Data and AI Manager at Outcome Health in Chicago, US. He has completed his Master of Science at University of Chicago, MBA in Finance and Marketing at IIM Rohtak, and BTech in Mechanical Engineering from BNIT. We welcome you, sir. Now, over to you, Richa, to take this conversation forward.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this podcast. So, as we can see from your career graph, we see that you've had quite a unique journey. After a specialization in marketing and finance, you've taken a plunge into analytics. So, what drew you to the field of analytics, and could you tell us a little about your journey?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. So my journey started with IBM. I was just very low-level developer, and then I started working on analyst kind of roles, and I worked at IBM for about 4 years. So I started working with clients were based out of US, and they were part of a large investment bank. But the only gap which I was feeling was that I couldn't do direct business with them, and that was a big. That was a big challenge for me in the sense that I wanted to sell them directly for a profit, and that helps you gather some kind of confidence that you can talk to senior people, you can deal with them, you can transact with them, and that's the reason I wanted to do an MBA because. If you start as a developer in a very large multinational company, it's very difficult to climb the ladder and go to a sales position or a business development position. It might take about 15, 20 years. I know some of my colleagues uh, who are still working at IBM, but they couldn't reach that level. They wanted to reach that level. So it's very important to make a shift as and when you realize that you want to do this thing. You are passionate about it. You know that you have a good direction and you want to grow in that direction. So I did my MBA from IIM Rohtak, and I was more interested in marketing than finance because finance was my domain. But I always thought I won't be able to excel in finance because it's really tough for me, and it's in a way it's not very creative for me because there are set of protocols which you have to follow in finance, and probably that's the reason finance wasn't for me. So fortunately, got a placement at Entity Data where I was able to start, a sales-driven role from India. But it was essentially an international placement where they told us that they will be training me in India with some of the senior colleagues in sales, where I could work with some of the larger deals which were valued about 15 to 20 million dollars. And then I moved to US when I got some grooming, and I started working here with different companies, C-level executives here in the states, mostly in the manufacturing, healthcare, and automotive industry. So that gave me a very huge and very large perspective, which I couldn't have gained in India, and I always wanted that. I wanted to reach to the last extent of business to know what is the last piece of the last way of doing business with people, with the senior most. So while I was doing all these things, when I was working in the US, meeting all these people, doing business by myself, you kind of start to feel like a mini CEO. You are bringing business for a company, you are bringing money for your company, you're building teams for yourself, and you are seeing all those small teams grow up. It's like small mini startups within the company. But from there, I realized I always loved technology. I started working on database systems, building products for a bank. But somehow I felt that I was missing the latest technologies like AI, which are really interesting. So I thought of making a quick shift, towards AI, and I planned that my sales experience as well as my people management experience would help me in the future to build better products. So I joined University of Chicago, had a 1.5 year of course, and deep dived and started making products by myself, some pet projects and all. And that's how I joined one of these companies. Joined a startup initially called Unifor, and I started work for a few months. So Uniphore was mainly based on building conversational AI chatbots. And now I have moved to Outcome Health, which is a healthcare tech company, and they wanted to build a data and AI product roadmap for them, so that they can build more AI solutions for the benefit of people and patients and doctors in the US. So that's how I moved.
Thank you, sir. What do you feel are some of the ways in which AI has impacted patient care, and what are the kind of trends that we can expect in future?
Yeah. So about AI in healthcare, it's very interesting because I'm a big fan of Marvel movies. So when you see Iron Man, every part of Iron Man suit can be used today to assist people with disability. AI is doing today, and that's what people are researching on. They're building small, arm-assisted robots or leg-assisted robots. Reading about a company the other day. It's called Envision. So what Envision has done is that they have taken Google Glasses and they have embedded their AI modules in the Google Glass. So any person who is blind, this AI will tell the blind person what's going on around him. It will speak to the person. It will scan all the images, all the videos around that person. If a person is walking around him, if a car is coming in front of him, if there is a book, the AI can read that book and speak to the person. So that's like another eye for a human being. So human beings have developed another alternative eye for people now. So I mean, the opportunities are endless. It could be anything. I think the sci-fi movies are a great example and a good direction in a way to show where we can reach today.
Yes, sir. With the way things are progressing, we feel like anything is possible nowadays. There is no
Yeah.
limit. Sky is the limit.
Yeah, but the problem is you have to make sure that it's really working, because the accuracy level that AI brings today to the market is not as high as 90% or 100%. There are always some probability which is left by AI in accuracy. Probably 65 to 75% is the normal level of accuracy for any AI chat. We have seen accidents which are happening, placards at a number of places, and that's a big damage to the reputation and the business. Just to AI, but there are also benefits to AI.
Yes, it's like a double-edged sword. They're both the things. Usually, whenever we are dealing with AI, there's always this issue of data security that comes up. So, what are the ways in which the companies are ensuring that the data is secure? Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah. So data security is a very funny thing, because so it's like insurance. So consumers are realizing it's very difficult for impose data security regulations, and even for governments to impose data security regulations on them. But of course, companies have responsibilities and accountability for securing data for consumers. Now, today, companies are trying to cover endpoint of the customer's data journey. For example, if you're buying something on a website, that information and that data is going from a web portal or an app to an application which is in the company, in the backend of the web center, the databases, etc. And hackers are sitting out there, corner and every nook and every endpoint to just get into the system and make use of your data. You might have seen one of the shows called Mr. Robot, where they have, they have social media profiles for their own benefit. I mean, they can change moods of people. They can lead people to do suicides and all. It's really risky. So, of course, companies have a lot of responsibilities. If you see, the other day I was reading a report. Team is about $125 billion in size, which is huge. But if you see the size of population of if you see the internet penetration of the whole world, it's just about 60%. That's 4.5 billion of people, which means there are other 40%, which is a huge. That's to access the internet. There will be a different set of. The other 60% is already matured, and this new 40% will still start learning to use internet. Abilities for people to get affected, and they could be used more. I mean, hackers can use them in a more bad, and these bad actors can use in ways. Another data point is the internet which we see today. the internet which we Google today is a very small chunk of the actual internet. We call is deep internet. It is actually 400 to 500 times larger than the regular internet which we use on Google. So we do not know they are doing, what are their intentions. And out of this deep internet, 1% of the internet size into dark internet, and dark internet is the which is very infamous for doing illegal activities. And you don't, most 90% of people, or maybe 95% of the people who are using internet today do not know how to get into deep internet or dark internet, and that's really risky. So when I keep these two things in my mind, it kind of realize that we are still very insecure in terms of data. We are more secure about our homes today. We have insurance for our homes, but we don't care our data. But when we lose our data, when our information, our photos on hacked, then we are more concerned about data than our home. I mean, even if our home is burning, we don't care. Then data is more important. Doing, and then we have regulations like GDPR, but GDPR is only probably to keep your data private and asking companies to have consensus with their users, but it just tip of the iceberg, because there are so many challenges which we are about to see, especially during COVID. All of us are working from we don't have healthy security protocols with us, and that gives an opportunity for the bad net, and from there to go to your company's internet. So it is more easier now for them to hack systems, to information systems. So from a data security standpoint, this year I think every company is facing some kind of problems, from Microsoft and Manchester United. Everyone has seen this year, especially this year, because probably most people are working. They have seen losses from hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's a big challenge now. If this thing continues for the next few years, work from home, probably security companies have to step up their game and find out what could be done. It's a big challenge. So we have to wait and see what's going to happen. But I think the security of data starts from end consumers themselves. If end consumers are secure, I think 20% of the work is done by the companies. Yeah, so the companies can go behind the consumers and they can focus more on the external bad actors who are trying to get into their systems. But if the end consumers are not with the companies, they are kind of ignoring what we have to, secure data, why we have to secure computers, lock our systems, and all those things. Then the companies have to focus first on the end consumers and then on the bad actors. So yeah, so there is a lot of struggle. I think social media is one of the most biggest places where which is easy to hack.
Sir, so the next few questions will be taken by me. So as you told that there are few negativities of these AI technology also. So what, according to you, are the reasons why chatbots and conversational AI are taking over the world in spite of its negativity?
Yeah, so AI and chat, of course, not taking over the world as of now, and I don't think they'll be taking over the world in my lifetime. And there's a minor difference between conversational AI and chatbots. So chatbots traditionally have been more programmatic. They have a set of questions, they have a set of answers. If a customer comes to your website and starts interacting with the chatbot, they will have a set of simple questions like how can I start my process of applying for a credit, and the chatbot might have some fixed answers. But you will typically notice that these chatbots are not able to answer if you ask some questions out of their syllabus. So that's the limitation of chatbots. On the other hand, conversational AI is something different, where they already have this set of questions, but they have variations of these questions. So if you ask a totally different question to them, they'll probably kind of think, or they'll keep in their database that we couldn't answer this thing, and probably they'll start learning from a couple of more interactions from a couple of different more customers. So conversational AI is still learning. The good thing about is conventional AI is not learning a lot I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It gives some opportunity for humans also to interact when customers have challenges, because as a customer myself, I don't always like to interact with a chatbot or a conversational AI. I want someone to think on their foot and, quickly resolve my problems. So that's a challenge. But other than that, I think the conversational AI market is huge. A lot of AI is not only predicting things, but most of it today is for automating things. For example, if you make a customer care call today, for the company, the cost is about $10 to $15 per call. But if you're using a conversational AI to resolve the issues, like, for example, if you have lost a credit card and you're calling, and on the other side, there is not a human being, but there is a robotic AI which is talking to you and asking questions. It just takes about a few seconds to block your card or replace your card, and that cost has reduced from $10 to $15 to about $1 or $2 or lesser. So that's easily a 90% cost savings for a company. So that's how AIs, conversational AI especially, are saving costs for the companies. But of course, they're not taking over the world yet. There is still a very, very long way to go.
So the next question would be, what skill set required to be AI product manager, and how much of it have you gained during your MBA?
Yeah, so, and that's a nice question, because a product manager is a very new role. So the products which were typically built early, I mean, by companies like like Google and Facebook, they used AI products. They built products which were used by end consumers, and they were mostly built by technical managers. But I think challenge is not just building AI products. The challenge is to have AI-enabled features in whatever products you already have, which means that you also need, or you need help to also build a good UI for the product, as well as to know the backend system. AI might be a small part of the product landscape. It might be a 10% or 20% improvement to the whole landscape. So you need the typical skills of a product manager, a normal product manager, like communicating with people, understanding their opinions, agreeing or disagreeing with the higher and lower priorities of the projects and the product features. So there has to be the same level of brainstorming which is going on in a lot of companies when they are building products. But additionally, you have to also have some kind of hands-on experience in AI, at least some level of understanding how AI works and how AI helps. Uh, Taking analogies of different companies' products like Google Maps or Facebook, chatbots, ideas will kind of help you to build a vision what you want to do. So different companies are different. So I'm working for a healthcare tech company right now. So the vision for this company is totally different. They want to use AI for different purposes, but AI is not their core business. Expect to earn revenues only based on AI enabled features. They have to embed AIs in some way so that it could be helpful in some way to to the doctors and the patients there. But in terms of skill sets, you of course have to have some hands-on experience. You should be able to communicate your opinions or vision to the company. You should be confident about that, and of course, logic and aptitude always help. Yeah.
We'll move to our concluding question right now. So you did your master's from two versatile universities. So what difference you realized in IIM Rohtak and in University of Chicago?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's not an apple to apple comparison, because both are different institutes in different places. But I can tell you what I learned from Rohtak. So yes, I think what I learned from Rohtak is to deal with people. People came from different backgrounds, having similar level of intelligence, similar level of aptitude. Uh, when you are whenever you are in crisis and you have a small team with you, you get to bond more with them, and that's what I think I learned from Rohtak. I think we were just about 120 students in our batch, and we had a lot of things to build for the upcoming batches, for the younger batches institute. So we had to start a number of initiatives, make our juniors more comfortable, talk to companies, make them comfortable so that they can come to our campus, uh, do a few things and initiatives so that we can spend time in the campus, inside the campus, so that we don't get bored. Because the campus is located a bit far from the city, so we have to spend our time in our own ways. So that kind of helps in the business environment today, because you can't stay secluded when you are working as a manager, or even if in any business environment, because you have to talk to people. You can't run a company. You have to take help from different kinds of teams, and that's why different teams make a company. So it's that's what helped me when I was at Rohtak. In terms of subjects, I can't say if a lot of subjects helped me, but what helped me was to manage maybe submissions or assignments at the same time, maybe that, because it helps you in time management. But then when I moved to States, I had a large perspective of the world, because there are so many people coming from different countries, and they're coming to us to a single spot where you can meet them, talk to them, brainstorm with them, which wasn't possible at Rohtak because we don't have that kind of international exposure. It would be good to have that. Another thing is University of Chicago has been in existence for about 130 years, where there have been graduates who have started companies, there have been Nobel laureates, and there have been so many people from different science, fields of science. So it's difficult to compare, but of course you get that flavor of globalization here. Talk to different people. There are a lot of electives that you can choose, in your schools, in your colleges. So your mind is very open-minded. You can think in different directions. You can think in different perspectives. You kind of meet different people. In my analytics course in University of Chicago, I met people who had a social science background, and they still wanted to do analytics. So learning AI wasn't a challenge for that person, but trying to implement what background he had in social science and using AI with that, what kind of changes he can bring to the society. It was a cool thing, because having a social science background combining with AI is very much common for Facebook, right? Because Facebook tends to try to understand what is the psychology and the behavior of users on Facebook, on social media. So that's a different route coming to AI. So yeah, so that's the primary difference. Otherwise, things were fun always at Rohtak.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
So that concludes our session. We would like to thank you, sir, for taking time of a busy day and coming here. We truly had an enriching experience. It was a pleasure listening and learning from your experiences. We are grateful and honored to have you as a guest for the evening. Thank you again, sir.